Yeah. So proceeding with our discussion from the previous class. So I talked about what project writing is about. Then I kind of briefly talked about chapter 2, chapter 3. Is that one briefly? Anyhow, then chapter 4. So your chapter 4 is where your own work begins as a researcher, as someone who contributes to knowledge. So your methodology. So out of the methodology that you have reviewed, you are going to pick one, or at least one. All right. So that's to tell you that when you are reviewing your methodology, you have to pay very close attention to what you are reviewing, because you have to pick one. Just like the theory, where you have to pick one of the theories, right? So here you have to pick one of the methods that the previous researchers have used. Now, so chapter 4 is about methodology. So A, selected theory, the things that you'll be having in this chapter, selected theory, one of the theories that you reviewed before. Now, model specification. So here, it's not really a big deal. From the journals you've read, you have seen how people specify their models. And when you're specifying your model, you have to be careful. It has to be in line with your theory. It has to be in line with your objective of the study. Alright, so we are going to talk about that too later. And one thing you should note is that in this course, by the time you finish this course, you will have written a mini project, because it's going to be practical in nature. You will be writing your project, and who will be supervising you, like kind of in one way or the other. So it might be the topic you are really interested in writing a project on, and once you understand what we are teaching, what you are being taught, so from there can kickstart it and guide you through what you should do. Not as a professional though, but as someone that just wants things to be kind of easier for you. Alright, so estimation technique, you're also going to pick an estimation technique which is from methodology. Your data source, you talk about your data source. Alright, where are you going to get your data from? Okay, if you are talking about Nigeria now, are we looking at world development? Is it index and indicators now? One of it WDI. Then is it National Bureau of Statistics? No, is it CBN Statistical Bulletin? Those things are not big deals, so they are going to be guided through them. So more or less, like WDI is a document in Excel. It is better to be viewed in Excel form. So you download the document, then open it via Excel. So you are going to see different countries and different kind of data. GDP per capita, GDP, manufacturing value added. You will see all of those things, so it's not a big deal. Alright, so we expand on that later. Then chapter 5 is your analysis. So here you put together your data according to your model specification. Alright, and then you are now analyzing them with the estimation technique that you spoke about in chapter 4. Alright, so from there you do a lot of stuff. Usually students don't even do this by themselves. They give it to professionals to do for them, but whatever happens, whether you did it yourself or not, it is important that you understand the result that was generated. So once you understand the result, then you can back it up with your own theoretical understanding. So if you give out your analysis to someone to do it for you, and the person is saying inflation, the person discovered inflation is not related to economic growth, like there is no relationship between inflation and economic growth, that is pretty questionable. So when you look at other studies, were there any studies that really said that there was no relationship at all? Okay, if you didn't have any studies saying that there's no relationship at all, then that means you have to kind of revisit your analysis again. You have to revisit your data. What is happening? Alright. Now what I'm trying to say is that it's not important, like it's not so necessary that your analysis brings yields the same result as other studies. Yours might yield a different result, and that's one of the beauty of research. So people might have been saying something like this happens like this all the time, but yours might be giving you a different result. Now, for example, let's talk about demand. On average, a higher price leads to a reduction in quantity demanded, right? I think that's a lot of demand. So I don't know how we started. But let's say the way it started, there was no on average, there was no ceteris paribus. What was there, what people just observed, was that Adam Smith or somebody, was that whenever price went up, quantity demanded fell, and vice versa. So that could have been what researchers in that time have been discovering. Now, maybe you carried out a research using the same data and figured that the higher the price, the higher the quantity demanded. You understand? Now you look at other studies, they've been like the higher the price, the lower the quantity demanded. But yours is like there's a positive relationship between price and quantity demanded. As price was going up, quantity demanded was going up too. So what is happening? And that would now, form the basis of a new research. What could be responsible for this? As long as you are sure of the data you are using, what could be responsible for this? So I believe it was something like that that might have resulted into, looking at the effect of income. All right, and that could have brought about the difference between these normal goods and luxury goods. So maybe that was when they discovered that, oh, there is a specific kind of commodity, right, that whenever its price goes up, people buy more of it and vice versa. So that is how, knowledge develops. So I'm not saying that your own research might not be in that manner, but you just have to be very, very careful of your data sets. You have to be very, very careful of your estimation technique if it follows proper econometric standard. And if you've done all of those things and your result is still saying that there is no effect between inflation and economic growth, then that brings about a new research work, which is to find out why that is happening or why that has happened, right? So that's not about where was I? So about analysis. Now chapter 6, which is the final one, you have discussion of findings. Now after doing your data stuff, a lot of stuff in chapter 5. So your results. Now discuss it. Okay, there is positive relationship between inflation and economic growth. The higher the inflation, the higher the economic growth. Okay, so what are your reasons? Then if you are a postgraduate student, as an undergraduate you may not be really pressured, but if you are a postgraduate student, you might have to back up your findings with some of the journals that you've read. All right, so you talk about other researchers that have discovered that kind of results as well. So according to your research and according to everything that you've done using this technique and whatever, you realize that the there is a positive relationship between inflation and economic growth, and this can be backed up by study. This maybe Oloye 2021, maybe Adam 2019, maybe Chukudi 2014. Just talk about. So that's to let your supervisor know that okay, there are other researchers that have figured out this kind of relationship as well. So it is important, and if as an undergraduate you can do it, it gives your work more beauty. Let us know that you know what you are doing, especially when you have controversial findings that are not in line with theory, in line with existing body of knowledge. So you have to go and look for other researchers that have kind of generated your own type of results and link your work with their own, with their own work. All right. Then you have policy recommendation. After discussion of findings, you've seen that okay, there's a relationship between inflation and economic growth. That means inflation is helping economic growth, right? If there's a positive relationship, then you recommend policies based on what you've discovered. Now, when you're recommending policies, you don't recommend policy on a variable that was not in your model, right? So you don't start talking about maybe institutions when institution is not inside your model in chapter 4. So all of these things are interconnected. That is one of the students that don't know what they're doing. They just go and copy policy recommendation of one work that was done at a particular time by a particular time and take it and dump it, rephrase the words, change active voice sentences into passive voice sentences, and then they have policy recommendations. So when your supervisor is now going with you, I'll be like, wait, they didn't talk about institutions in your project, so why are you recommending policy about institutions? Right, so what happened? Then it takes another policy recommendation, like what happened? So you have to recommend policies based on the variables in your model. So your policy might be 3, 4, or 5. But for me, 3, 4, 5 is okay. All right. The limitations of the study. Now, all of these ones are, like I said earlier, you don't have to include all of these things in your research, research work. But it's kind of nice. What were the things that limited you in your study? All right. So you have to include that. Sometimes it might be difficulty in generating data. So it was difficult to get the data. Let's say you wanted to use a particular data to capture. Okay, let me say you want to use life expectancy to capture economic development. But then when you looked at your scope of 1970, 2021, you discovered that you don't have data for life expectancy throughout those years. Sometimes there were times that the data was available, there were times that data was not available. So that forced you into not using life expectancy again and maybe using per capita income, but you would have preferred using life expectancy. So that was a limitation to what you really wanted to carry out, so you kind of can talk about it. Then sometimes maybe money or time. So the time was too short for you to do what you really wanted to do. Alright, and maybe resources if you are using primary data. So you would have loved to, let's say, administer maybe like 2,000 questionnaires or 1,000 questionnaires, but because of funds, you could not administer more than 400. So that is also a limitation. So you can include all of those things. You wrote your research by yourself, right? So you should know your limitations. Alright, suggestions for further research work. So from what you have done, so you can also suggest topic for other researchers, right? So after you've done all of your project, somebody can read your suggestions for further research and make that suggestions a topic, you understand, and then write a project on it. So let's say you've written on economic. I'll talk about that when in our next video, like finding the topic. So you've written on the impact of government expenditure on economic development, okay, and you use per capita income to capture economic development. So you could suggest here that in your research you have used per capita income to model economic development, but you would suggest that other future researchers use the remaining parts of HDI, right, which is life expectancy and adult literacy, I think, to carry out in their own project. Alright, so HDI is divided into three. So you have three components or three concerns. So GDP per capita, life expectancy, and adult literacy. So you use GDP per capita or real GDP per capita. So you are suggesting that others could also check the impact of government spending on economic development using life expectancy to model economic development or adult literacy. You get? So that's something about that. So you might add this. Depends on, like I said, depends on your supervisor, depends on your school style, depends on the work you are doing. And I said depends on something else too the other time. I've forgotten. So that's that about introduction to project writing. So in the next topic, we'll be talking about finding a topic. So I think that might be like 2 classes. So after finding a topic, we'll then start to discuss each chapter, what do they entail. And I'll be using an example. Alright, you in this course will also find a topic. So it is that topic that we are going to be using as an example. Like you are going to be writing your project on that topic throughout this course. So let's say we have 20 students. By the end of the course, we'll be expecting 20 different project work. So that's it. So it's a practical class, not just theory and theory. Okay, so that's that about that. See you in the next class. Thank you for watching.